right, guys, welcome back to Marlins 9. It's been a while. A lot has happened on a personal level for me. I am married now. Came back from my honeymoon last week. It's been a good break, but I needed to come back. I needed to do a recap on the entire 2024 season for the Miami Marlins. And yes, I am wearing a Yankees hat right now. I am all in on the New York Yankees to win the World Series. That is who I am rooting for. My grampy, who passed away back in August, was a big Yankees fan his whole life. That is my team in the postseason. Let me know in the comments, Marlins fans, who are your teams you're rooting for? What is your team that you will be rooting for that the Marlins are out? I'm also wearing an Oregon Ducks sweatshirt. For those watching on YouTube can see it. Huge win against Ohio State. But this is a baseball podcast. So we're going to get back on track, get back into my thoughts on a tumultuous 2024 season. But there are some storylines that definitely need to be talked about. And as we get into this show, consider subscribing. Consider sharing the podcast. Consider sharing the podcast. We're going to still be doing off-season episodes, and let's grow this thing even more into 2025. So the first topic I'm going to get into, the injuries to the pitching staff. That was, in terms of on-field performance, the biggest hindrance to the Miami Marlins. You lose Sandy Alcantara last offseason with Tommy John surgery. And Yori Perez is struggling with a thumb injury, kind of his elbow injury is the nail. They put a fake nail on him back before the season even started. And then he's had elbow soreness. And you don't really know exactly what's going on with that. And then, boom, the news drops. He's shut down, Tommy John surgery. So right off the bat, entering opening day, two of your best starters, presumably, are lost. So the Marlins are already in a huge hole. Now they have the depth. You have depth pieces. Braxton Garrett, who broke out last season in the Marlins postseason run and even started a playoff game for them. Started one of those two playoff games. Trevor Rogers was coming into the year healthy. Ryan Weathers, Max Meyer. So the Marlins had young members of the pitching staff to kind of take the place and try to eat up those innings that you would be missing from your star pitchers like Sandy or Yuri. However, that turned out not to be the case. Max Meyer pitches well his first two starts, gets sent down to AAA. It was an obvious service time manipulation tactic that many organizations use, but it's often more criticized when the Marlins do it because of the way they typically run their organization. I was upset with it. A lot of other people were upset with it. However, so Max is back in AAA, not an injury there. Braxton Garrett, he gets hurt during the year. Jesus Luzardo, who's the opening day starter for the Marlins, and was starting to pitch really, really well closer to the trade deadline. More so, in fact, that analysts around the sport said it's a no-brainer that he'll be dealt at the deadline. That's how well he was starting to pitch. Boom, he gets hurt back, shut down. Ryan Weathers, who I thought about June, I'd say, as we approach the All-Star break, I thought Ryan Weathers would have been the Marlins All-Star selection. If he continued how he was pitching, he was having that great of a season. He gets hurt, 60-day injured list. So Braxton Garrett injured. Jesus Luzardo injured. Ryan Weathers injured. Three of the guys to start the year, and that's not even counting Yuri and Sandy. You look at if everybody was healthy on this team, those would be your five pitchers, I would argue. And at some point or another, they all miss significant time. So the rotation was completely decimated before it even got a chance to get in a rhythm or a groove. And when you look at a team like the Marlins who are limited offensively, then when the rotation's your strength and you don't have your guys there, it's not going to be a good season, you're going to lose a lot of games. And that's ultimately one of the biggest reasons that contributed to a 100-loss season for the Miami Marlins. So, moving on to the next topic, we have my thoughts on Peter Bendix, the new president of baseball operations in charge of the Miami Marlins personnel decisions. And boy, I'm going to be just brutally honest. I really did not like how he was handling things early on. And I say that both from a media standpoint, where how he interacted with the media and his personnel decisions. I hated that he traded Luis Arias. I hated that he traded Arias that early in the season. I didn't like going into the season how he said we're going to have one eye on the future, one eye on the present, when it's very clear, especially when Sandy and Yuri went down, that this team was not making an effort to improve themselves on the field and build upon that postseason appearance. I didn't like that. I felt it was not genuine, and quite honestly, I felt like he wasn't telling the truth to the fans. That these fans who invest money and time into the Marlins were being fed a product that they didn't deserve, especially coming after a postseason appearance. And I felt that the Marlins organization owed it to us fans to try to run it back after 2023. And when you sign Tim Anderson as your marquee signing and you trade for Christian Bethancourt and that's about it, and you wash your hands and you say, all right, that's our signings, especially with the injuries to Sandy and Yuri. And then you trade Luis Arias, the game's best pure hitter, in May. That's throwing in the white towel. And we saw more of that as the season progressed. I've said this before that I consider analytics to be a tool. I don't consider it to be something that you should throw all your marbles at. You cannot make analytics the be-all, end-all. It is definitely a mixture of both. There is a place in baseball for analytics. I think the Marlins have gone completely opposite of that and have said, you know what? We're going to ride and die with analytics. Every decision we make will be about analytics. And I don't necessarily agree with that. You look at the Tampa Bay Rays, I still say they haven't won a World Series, and it takes a lot of luck to get to where they are. Consistently, you need to hit on every draft, every international free agent signing. It takes a lot of luck and a lot of skill. But Peter Bendix came into the trade deadline. I already have a negative, feeling about his direction for this team. And to his credit, I felt like he absolutely killed the trade deadline. He absolutely cooked trade deadline season. Tore down the active roster. I mean, we're talking a third of the active roster was traded. AJ Puck, Tanner Scott, Brian De La Cruz. I mean, you name it. These Jazz Chisholm was the big one. These guys were getting shipped out of Miami for prospects after prospects and quality prospects. There are some really intriguing names there that were brought into Miami system. Connor Norby being the biggest one who really showed his potential to be an everyday contributor and was an everyday contributor for the end of 2024. That was a Trevor Rogers trade to the Baltimore Orioles, getting back Kyle Stowers and Connor Norby. And then you have the Diamondbacks. You acquired Davison De Los Santos, who was the best power hitter in minor league baseball, for AJ Puck. Tanner Scott, you trade him, you get a plethora of prospects back. Pitchers who the Padres, you could say, were, hurting their development because the Padres aren't very good at developing pitchers and the Marlins are. You get Robbie Snelling, Adam Mazur, guys that you can work with in your organization to get them to a point where they will be in the rotation fairly soon. I mean, Adam Mazur's already debuted. Robbie Snelling's 20 years and in Double-A. These guys were highly touted prospects. And when you are in an organization like the Marlins who can develop that pitching, it's an added bonus to your development as a pitcher. So I really love the trade deadline. I still don't like the the premise of this rebuild per se, where you're just going to make every decision purely analytical. And I said that before. That I don't have a problem with the rebuild. When the season was over and you weren't going to make any meaningful contributions to the major league club, yes, tear it down. We've accepted it. I've accepted it. I know there's a lot of fans that haven't, but this is what it is. I do want to see these guys contribute next season. I want to see the on-field product continue to develop. Because frankly, we're Miami Marlins fans. I don't want to watch the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp or the Pensacola Blue Wahoos win their league championship. That's not what it's about for me. It's about getting the Miami Marlins to a place and eventually watching them win a World Series. That's what it is as a fan. So what is going to be the key for me as a fan next season, I want to see improvement on the record. Of course, I want to see this team be competitive. But when it comes to individual players, I think that is the most important thing going into 2025. Will Davis and De Los Santos contribute in Miami? Will we see that his power translate into the major leagues? Agustin Ramirez, one of the players acquired from the Yankees in the Jazz Chisholm trade. Will he be up in Miami? He's major league ready. These young pitchers, how are they developing? Snelling, Major. You know what I'm saying? Like, this team is going to be full of young talent. Connor Norby, Kyle Stowers. How is Norby going to respond to an 162-game season and try to establish himself as a building block for the Marlins in the future? So that is going to be a really important piece of the storyline heading into next season. Another storyline, which I'm sure we're going to cover on this podcast a lot in the offseason, is the manager situation, because the Marlins have parted way with Skip Schumaker. The Marlins and Skip Schumaker, a 2-year run, I guess you could say, with him being the manager of the team. And his first season, it was the manager of the year, wins the manager of the year award, and takes him to the playoffs. And you feel really good about it, and you feel really good about the culture he's established. But it doesn't end up a long-term fix. He didn't turn out to be the guy the Marlins are going to roll with for the long term, and that's not his fault. I loved Skip as a manager. I felt like every day he showed up wanting to win and trying to make every single decision, whether that was a lineup decision, the bullpen, the rotation, trying to get this Marlins team to win, even when you're 20, 30 games under 500. There was nothing he could have done this season, given the personnel he was given to start the year and the injuries, that would have propelled the Marlins into the playoffs. This wasn't about, I think Skip's a bad manager, we're letting him go. If you ask me, he should be the manager in 2025. He should. But going back to Peter Bendix and this new front office, they want to bring all their own guys in. I mean, that isn't just the managerial position. We're talking scouts. We are talking stadium employees, clubhouse workers. I mean, they cleaned house. I think a couple weeks back, they got rid of 70 plus team employees. The number was high. Low-level employees. They're cleaning complete house. And I don't like that, because if you're good at your job, why do you have to get rid of me to pick someone that you want? You know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm sitting there as Skip Schumaker and I took this team to the playoffs last year and I've established this culture, it seems a bit selfish as a Marlins fan to watch a new president of baseball operations say, nope, I want everything my way, or the highway. Because that's what it seems like. That's really what it seems like. I talked about this a couple months ago. Oz Ocampo, who was one of the best international scouts for the Houston Astros for years and signed many, many core players for them, came to Miami, was only given a couple years before he's run out of town because he wasn't the original, part of the original new regime that Peter Bendix and company are. He was with Kim Ng. I mean, we're talking across the board. They want their own guys. I don't like it. I don't think it's the right decision, but that's what it is. It is what it is. And we're going to have to see who Bendix wants as a manager. I anticipate the manager being very analytically driven. I don't think Skip was as analytically driven as other managers are starting to become, other front offices are starting to become. And it makes more sense for the Marlins to kind of align their front office view with the new manager position view. Analytics will be first. I don't like it, but it is what it is. The last topic we're going to get into in this recap of 2024, individual standouts. Who were the players in a 100-loss season that I enjoyed watching, or I think that the Marlins can take and really make them a part of the core moving forward? And I got about three. I'm going to give you three. I'm going to give you two offensively. I'm going to give you one pitcher. First, offensively, we're going to go with Jake Burger. Jake Burger is somebody that started out really slow and then heated up. He was the best trade acquisition at the deadline in 2023 for the Marlins, him and Josh Bell. The Marlins have team control of him for multiple years after this season, and he's consistent. You know what you're going to get out of him. He's going to hit home runs. He's going to hit 30 home runs a year. He's going to hit, depending on the average, he's not going to have a terrible average. Pulling up his numbers right now because I didn't have them pulled up. 250 hitter. And the RBIs don't necessarily matter because of the offense right now. I love RBI as a stat. I think it's good. I think it shows your ability to drive in runs, but you're not going to have a ton of RBIs. But 250, hit 29 bombs. I mean, OPS of 760. He's a solid player. You can move him around. He can play third. He can play first. He can DH. I like Jake Burger. I think he offers power. And the Marlins have been needing power for years. Ever since Giancarlo Stanton went out of town, the Marlins have been needing power. Jorge Soler, of course, 2 years ago. And they didn't offer him a qualifying deal. It's a tale as old as time. But Jake Burger will be in town for a while. He is somebody that the Marlins definitely can build around and be a part of a future postseason lineup. Another guy. Now, I mentioned him earlier. He's a prospect. The jury is still out, but I love his approach at the plate. I love the tools he shows is Connor Norby. Connor Norby has extra base gap power. He can hit home runs. I could see over 162 game schedule him hitting 15, 20, 23 home runs. I could see him hitting 35, 40 doubles. The question is the whiff rate. Can he hit the ball as consistently as you need him to? Because there was a couple games where he was going 0 for 4, 0 for 5, 5 strikeouts. Can't have that. You've got to really work this offseason, because in the second half of last season, he showed us he has the skills. Now, can it translate to a full season, a full regular season, where we look up, he's got 550 ABs, and he's like hitting 270, 20 bombs, 40 doubles. You're like, all right, this dude's a stud. Time will tell on him. I got one more offensively. I lied. I said two. I wanted to throw in this third one because I just thought of him, Otto Lopez. Otto Lopez defensively is elite. He is elite. It all comes down to his bat. And his bat isn't terrible. It's nothing good. It's nothing great, but it's not terrible. Okay? So Otto Lopez, I expect to be a role player on this Marlins team, but he was a pleasant surprise, a waiver pickup from the Giants. Credit to Peter Bendix, got him, real pleasant surprise because that man is elite defensively. So I wanted to throw shout out to Otto Lopez. The last player I'm going to name was one of the injured pitchers, and that's Ryan Weathers. Ryan Weathers, like I said at the beginning of the year, he was on fire. He was on fire. He was showing why he was a former first-round pick. He comes into the Marlins organization, gets to work with Mel Stoudemire Jr., who, side note, is now they've parted ways too. They want to bring in another pitching coach. So really interested to see how that develops. But Ryan Weathers showed why he can be an all-star in the future. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but when you're throwing 97, 98 miles an hour, you have that elite breaking ball. Big, tall, left-handed pitcher. The stuff is there. The stuff is there. It's never not been there. It's just been about harnessing it. I really like Ryan Weathers. I hope he stays healthy and can make 30 starts for the Marlins next year. So that's been my individual standouts. I'm going to close by saying this. It's tough being a Marlins fan. It just is. You know, we see too many losses, like whether that's personnel and players leaving, managers leaving, or games. We see a lot of losses, a lot of L's, but stick with it. Do not quit on your team. If you're a diehard like me, you're never going to quit on this team. Never. I don't care if we lose 140 games and break the White Sox and the Mets record. I will be here every step of the way cheering on this Marlins team. That's going to do it for today. As always, let's go fish.